back, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. It's a How to Podcast series. I have another great podcaster on the show to talk about a show. Shawn is here. We're going to be talking about getting healthy and growing. Shawn's going to help us in all of that, grow our podcast, but also grow our life as well. Shawn's got a great show, and he's all set up. He's got his speak pipe. His buy me a coffee's all set up. We'll have links to everything in the show notes. Please go out and support another great podcaster. Shawn, welcome as my guest co-host. How are you?
Dave, so far so good. Thank you for having me. Thank you for already setting me up with a couple great things that I'm excited to share. So as we connected, host the Growth by Shawn podcast, all things health and fitness related, trying to get people healthy, and we'll do the best we can here.
I love it. When did the podcast start?
So I started the podcast in early 2020, 2021. I don't have an exact date, so between 3 and 4 years now. I actually started it when I was just venturing into personal training. I had extra time on my hands. I was just trying to learn exactly what we're doing here. I was just trying to learn from other people. And I was like, what's the easiest way to learn? Go and have conversations with people. I'm huge on communicating. So I was like, this gives me an opportunity to go and talk to a bunch of different people, learn from them. And that way I don't got to sit down and read a book instead. It was a way easier way for me to learn. So that's when I started. That's why I started it. Good.
And what about your own personal health journey? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Oh God.
Come on.
So we'll date all the way back to high school there, because I was that very cliche avatar of overweight child, low confidence, just husky more in a sense is what I liked to call it back in the day. But it really didn't start until actually my junior year of high school. I was close to 40 pounds heavier than I am right now. I was 220, 230-ish. Between my junior year of high school and my senior year, I dropped over 25 pounds just in that summer. And I'm not saying it was the healthiest way. I don't think it was necessarily in an unhealthy way, but I'll preface that it wasn't very sustainable. Now, one, I was able to lose that much weight in such a short amount of time. Also, because I was a young 16-year-old man, and I could still eat whatever to a degree, but I started exercising. Now, for today's day and age, someone that's listening to this that's not a 16-year-old kid, just because you start exercising doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to drop 25 pounds. Not how it works. Yeah. So that's really the catalyst to where everything started. And then from there, I started to get into, I actually went into school for accounting. I was like, wow, I could never sit at a desk for more than 1 hour a day. Let me go and do something different. And one of my buddies was like, I do exercise science. I was like, that sounds cool. And I transferred schools and then did that instead. Nice. So that was where everything started.
Wow. Yeah, because I think that gives us context to your podcast again, and why it's important to you. Yeah. What's your big why for your show?
Honestly, really, I'm still figuring that out. And that's why I like the first part of this question for us is the why behind the show. It started as just, okay, I'm going to go and learn from everyone else, right? But now it's, what do I actually want it to be? Do I want to monetize it? All of these different questions. And so figuring out that why right now is difficult. And I think this could be a great back and forth conversation is, do you think that I even need a why in my show right now? Or right now I do it because it's fun. And if it wasn't fun anymore, then I wouldn't do it. And I get to meet a lot of people. I get to network with a lot of people, but there's a lot of selfish reasons behind it too. So would it be awesome to go and sit and podcast and be Joe Rogan for the rest of my life? Sure. But you know what? I don't have his life. And so I don't know what it would honestly entail and look like, so behind like having a real why and wanting to grow my show, I've never even had a desire to grow my show, which I think is part of the reason it doesn't grow like crazy. What are your thoughts behind that? And a lot of the people that you talk to, do you guys have to have a specific why in order to grow the show or even build more momentum with it?
I think sometimes when in podcasting, a why does help to keep you motivated, to keep you coming back to the mic. Because sometimes life gets in the way. You get busy, things happen, and your podcast kind of just fades away, and you just don't show up for your audience anymore. And you're like, oh yeah, I had a podcast. Forgot about that.
Hmm.
And you're like, because your why doesn't really bring you to your topic and bring you to your audience.
Hmm.
A why does help to kind of to give you some focus for your show, and you're not going to be all over the place. One day you're talking about health, and the next day you're talking about finances, and the next day you're talking about, sports, right? Your audience is really kind of like, where are we going? I
Yeah.
came for one thing and I'm getting something totally different.
Hmm.
A why does kind of help kind of focus you a little bit, but a why does not necessarily mean money
Yep.
by any means, right? And
Well,
making money with your podcast.
yeah, I think that's part of my issue right now, for lack of a better term. So, my podcast, Growth by Shawn Podcast. So, I have a variety of different guests, and I love to talk health, fitness, nutrition, how to develop habits, all of these different types of things. But I'm interested in so many different topics too. What do you think about actually having some type of very specific niche where you're an expert in it versus, hey, I love all these different things and I want to talk about all these different types of things too?
No, that's my problem because I have 8 different podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they don't cross over too much. They're 8 different buckets and they're all kind of separate. They all do their own thing. They all have their own audiences. I do have people who jump from one to the other because they like elements of my show. They're like, oh, I want to go check out Dave's other show. Great.
Mm-hmm.
But they really don't cross over.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I do on the How to Podcast series, which I'm playing with, is I might have a topic, say like making money with your podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll do like 5 episodes in a row, and then it's like beginning, middle, and done. I move on to a new topic. So I was able to focus on something that interests me in the moment, do a few episodes about it as a group, and then I go back to what I was doing before.
Mm-hmm.
It gives me the chance to really, really focus in on something I'm interested in. But then I always come back to it's always wrapped around podcasting, but I always
Mm-hmm.
come back to my main flow and my main way that I do my show. So I get these it's kind of like a little off ramp when you're on the highway for a
Mm-hmm.
long time and you need a rest. There's a little rest area where you can
Okay.
pull off the highway, take a break, and then you get
Yep.
back on the highway again.
Mm.
That's kind of how I look at it for my little mini series that I
Okay.
do because I'm curious about it.
Yep.
Is my audience? Maybe, but it's catching my attention. So I
Yeah.
want to talk about it. So for you, you could have people on for fitness,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're like, I'm really into this new TV show,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a chance to talk to one of the actors from the show. I'd like to have them on my podcast. It's not
Mm-hmm.
really related to health and fitness,
Yep.
but it's something that interests me. And it
Mm-hmm.
gives me as a listener the opportunity to know more about you. Because
Mm-hmm.
now I'm like, wow, Shawn's really into this thing.
Yeah.
I'm into this thing as well. So now I have a bond with you. So
Okay.
yeah, it's your show, right? You can do whatever
Yeah.
you want. I would just I'd ask your audience. That's probably the
Mm-hmm.
best way. And
Okay.
say, hey guys, I'm thinking about talking about this. What are your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts? Go to my
Mm-hmm.
SpeakPipe link and leave me a message. I
Yeah.
want to do a topic about this or this. What do you want me to talk about?
Okay.
It's going to take a little while to get people to
Yeah.
start responding, right? But once they do, and then they hear that you're responding back to them and bringing their stuff onto your podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
Dave in Canada left me a message. Dave says we should do more of this. So thanks, Dave, for
Yeah.
your message. As a
Okay.
listener, I'm like, what? I'm on Shawn's podcast? What?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So anything you could do like that, use your audience. They'll kind of give you some good ideas.
Okay. I'm always trying, like, my main focus is I'll tell you the selfish reason and then I'll tell you more of the service-based reason. The selfish reason is because when people come onto my show, it's an hour of mentorship for me. In terms of how I produce the show and what I want people to take away from it, a perspective shift, an epiphany moment, a little golden nugget that for some reason resonated with them. That's the reason that I do the show for the people that listen. And then the selfish reason is, again, just the hour of mentorship for me, right? And so right now I'm trying to find a way just to bridge the gap between those two things. Where do you think it's I need to shift my perspective into just giving, just give to the entire audience, or continue to do it for some of these selfish reasons that I have too?
it's kind of a learning journey, right? Because as a listener to your show, you're in the process of learning something. So, for example, say you wanted to write a book. So
Mhm.
you brought on a book coach to teach about writing a book because
Mhm.
you selfishly want to write your own book.
Yeah.
And how better to learn than to bring on an expert? I
Mm.
have a whole podcast, 390 episodes around authorship, and I'm not even an author,
Okay.
right? So I have
Yeah.
people come on and they're teaching me how to write a book, and
Mm.
they're also teaching my audience at the same time how to write a
Okay.
book. But I'm learning from experts and then picking the path that works for me if I ever decide to write a book.
Okay.
So I'm bringing on things that help me to get
Mhm.
better, like you're doing,
Mhm.
but I'm also keeping in mind my audience at the same time. So that's not just it's not just all about me learning, but how can we help the audience learn? We're doing it right now.
Yeah.
You and I are having a conversation
Yeah.
for the sake of you and I having a conversation.
Yep.
Yes, but also there's someone listening to this right now
Mhm.
and their earphones are on, they're busy washing dishes or walking the dog. They're listening to you and I talk about this,
Yeah.
going, I'm just like Shawn. I
Mhm.
have the exact same questions that Shawn has.
Yeah.
So you can have someone learn and grow as yourself, but always remember, right? There's one more person here. And I think sometimes we
Mhm.
forget
Yeah.
that they're actually here.
Yep.
So anytime we can go, hey, thank you for listening. I hope you're enjoying Shawn's comments and questions because he's got a great podcast. You should go listen to his
Mhm.
podcast. And then we go back into our conversation.
Yeah.
It's really nice to be able to address them in the room, even
Yep.
though in the moment we can't see them.
Yeah. So I do have two other questions for you that aren't 100% related. The first one, so my podcast is the Growth by Shawn podcast, but I also have a nutrition coaching business, Growth by Shawn Nutrition Coaching. All right. And I have kept the same name and brand for the two of those. Do you think it's important to go and differentiate and separate the two or keep them under the same umbrella right now?
For your current podcast, are you
Mhm.
referring back to your nutrition business as well, or is it separate in the moment?
Um, I don't necessarily market it a ton. Like when I on the podcast, I will shout out or put in show notes how to work with me, um, links for my coaching application. And so everything that I do is just growth by Shawn right now. But I've also been told, I mean, we go and listen and we have a bunch of different perspectives and it's all about what you want to listen to, right? A bunch of people in group A will go and tell me to go and separate the two. A bunch of people will go and tell me in group B to not. And it's whichever one I decide to do, right? Whichever
Yeah.
one feels right. And so I'm just curious on your own opinion. And this conversation will just help flesh that out a little bit for me, right?
Yeah. There seems like there's a connection there between the
Mm-hmm.
two. Let's do something absurd. Let's say you're a mechanic and you fix
Mm-hmm.
cars, but you have a podcast about baking.
Mm-hmm.
You're making cakes. Okay, well, those don't really seem to go together.
Okay.
So to have you talk about your auto mechanic shop on your baking cakes podcast, I don't see the correlation there. I don't see that's
Mm-hmm.
not maybe I'm not the right audience for that.
Yeah.
So, but I see a bridge between the two for sure.
Okay.
It's just all about really what serves you, little things that you can do without being too promoty
Mm-hmm.
and talking about too much is, for example, if you're looking for more clients
Mm-hmm.
on your podcast, just do an episode where you talk and you say, I was with one of my clients. Dave is one of my clients, and Dave had a question. And here's his question. And I wanted to share the answer with you as well as you listen to this, because I was able to help Dave with his question. But I would love for you to hear the answer as well.
Okay.
So you just told me in that moment that you have clients.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't say anything about your business,
Mm-hmm.
but you do have clients. And as a listener, I perk up and go, Shawn has clients.
Yeah.
I can work with Shawn.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Okay.
well, wow. I've been listening to your podcast forever. I really like your show. And
Mm-hmm.
now I have a chance to work with you. Here's my credit card, Shawn.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go. Let's go.
Okay.
I want to work with you. And it's
Gotcha.
just a simple thing of saying, again, you're bringing value,
Yep.
right? Dave had a question. Here's his question. Here's the answer I gave Dave. I wanted to share with you,
Gotcha.
right? It's all about
Yeah.
value at
Okay.
the end of the day, right?
Gotcha.
But yeah, a bridge between the two might be a
Yeah.
good thing.
Okay. And then my other question. So my podcast, how I view it, I think Growth by Shawn podcast is a good podcast. What, even if it's not for me personally, but what differentiates a good podcast and a great podcast?
A lot of it sits in the title.
Okay.
Okay. So I shared this example with somebody this week.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if you heard the name Chasing Dreams Podcast,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and you saw that on your phone as you're scrolling through, what is that podcast about? What do you think? Chasing Dreams Podcast.
I'm going to say goal setting.
It's a sleep podcast.
Oh God. Okay.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that moment, without clarifying what it means, you and I have two totally different opinions of what that podcast is about. We didn't even hit play yet.
Yeah.
It just said Chasing Dreams Podcast.
Hmm.
You went, oh, I'm not into that. And I'm like, I can't sleep at night. I need that podcast.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I see yours, I see growth.
Yeah.
Right? Is it gardening? Is it growing your business? Is it growing taller? Like how to get taller? I like growing like plants.
Yeah.
What growing what? Growing your family? Growing
Okay.
your library of books? Like grow what? So
I see what you're saying.
I mean, that title is so important. My show is very evident, How to Podcast. Right. And it's actually brought people to me just by having such a very narrow and specific title. It's right there in the title. You can't really confuse that with anything else.
Okay.
Right. It's blatantly obvious, kind of boring,
Yep.
but very obvious.
Okay.
So, having your Growth by Shawn, I would then add, like, you should have your book titles that have, so if let's say your podcast was a book, Growth by Shawn is the name of your book. And they have that colon, and then they have a little bit of extra in the title of a book, the subtitle, that gives you more context about the title of the book. You can have that in your podcast without changing anything. It can still be Growth by Shawn. Fine. Everything you do, everything you say, everything you do, and you've built all this up. Great. But you can add and play with the extension of your podcast name to give more clarity about what type of growth.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
You could have mental growth, physical growth, spiritual growth. There's all types of different growth. So when you go back to your original question about, can I do these other things in my show without changing? You can then play with that title extension and do a little mini thing where, let's say for the month of June, you're going to focus on physical growth, like how to grow physically. And then in September, you're going to do mental health topics. So mental health. So it'll be, Growth by Shawn, mental health in a busy world, or mental health for your young parents, right? That little extension gives you the chance to be found in your podcast beyond the original name of your show. It just gives you some clarity. And then you can change it. You can change it to something else. Still keep your regular podcast name and just play with the extension and see what happens to your listenership. You might see a little bump where people are searching for the extension words that you're using, maybe more than the actual name of your show.
I had never thought about something like that.
And you can play with that anytime.
Yeah.
And then I would also say use your episode titles as well.
Okay.
Name and your titles at the same time and play in that space, because all those are searchable. Even your show description, your notes that would be on your phone when you press play on this episode, all of those words are searchable as well. So, and I know that because I had an author podcast episode, multiple authors in one book, each wrote a chapter. Some of the guests came to me. I was supposed to interview everybody, for all 20 authors. Some of them just didn't do it. They didn't show up. So I only got like 18, 17 of the 20 authors, but I listed all of the authors' names in the show notes. And you could search the author names that didn't appear on my show. You could still find them on YouTube and in your podcast app, even though they never came on my podcast, but they were part of the book. So it does work. You can search those names and they will show up. So use that title of your podcast, use your episode note titles, and then your notes that go along with it. Those are really searchable fields.
Okay. So now when you're looking at the numbers and the growth of the audience and the downloads and all these different things, are you constantly, when you talk to people, okay, are you encouraging them to go and continue to look at the numbers, analyze every single thing that they're doing in terms of what's working, what's not, or having someone disconnect from all of those numbers? That way they're not just searching for that little bit of dopamine and just continuing to put out show after show after show.
I'm going to spin it back to you. Where are you at on this right now?
I look at the numbers once a week when I put my show out. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if I care. Part of me cares, but not enough where I'm like constantly checking it every single day.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure right now.
So that goes back to our original comment around why.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing the show?
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to grow your audience so that you can be monetized and make money from your podcast, those stats are really important. You want to be growing. You want to know, and you want to know if you're doing something wrong.
Mm.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
The biggest number that I like to focus on is how long people listen to my episode.
Okay.
If
How
they're
do you
here
figure
for
that
10 seconds, 20 seconds, and they bounce, and I have a 45-minute episode, I just wasted 44 minutes of my time creating an episode that nobody listens to.
Yeah.
I'll just make a 1-minute podcast then.
So
if you're
how
only
do I
going to be here.
Yeah.
Right?
How do I figure that out?
You can see that through when you log in. If your podcast is available on Apple,
Mm-hmm.
Apple will give you retention stats, which will show you episode by episode. You'll see a graph and you'll see where people drop off. You'll see it on Spotify.
Okay.
Also, if you log into Spotify, whether or not you're hosted there, those are all your platforms that you submit your podcast to be on those different apps. A lot of them will have retention stats that'll give you a really good snapshot of where people are listening. So for this show, I know that 60% of my audience listens to the entire thing.
Okay.
I lose people. I see it kind of start at 100% for the first 5 to 10 minutes, and then it drops down to 80, drops down to 70, and then it usually stays steady from there for about 60%. So I know that 100% of my audience starts and 60% of my audience stays to the end. The biggest indicator to Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all of those apps that your podcast episode is worth promoting on their end, for Apple to promote you and Spotify to promote you, YouTube, is if people stick around. If everybody that they send to your podcast leaves 10 seconds after they arrive, Apple says there's something wrong here. Everybody we send to Shawn's podcast leaves. So we're going to stop sending so many people there. Reverse that. Everybody we send to Shawn's podcast stays. 100% of his audience stays to the end of every single episode, whether he does a 5-minute episode or 45-minute episode, everyone stays. We're going to send more people there. Why? Because we want people to spend time on the app. We want people to stay on Apple. We want people to stay on YouTube. And that's the best way to make people stay, is do good content that keeps them from the beginning to the end. So the best stat for us to look at beyond how many people listen is how long did they listen. You can go buy listens. It's not a good idea because it's all inflated and fake. Those aren't real people. You can go buy listens, but they listen to 10, 20, 30 seconds of your show and then they leave. Does that make you feel good that you're talking to an empty room?
No.
Imagine
not.
if it was a big conference, right?
Yeah.
And Shawn's on stage to talk about how to live a healthy life. There's 100,000 people there for 10 seconds and they all stand up and leave.
Yeah.
You haven't even started talking yet. You're just like, hi, everyone. Welcome. Where's everybody going?
Yeah.
What's happening? And now there's 3 people in the room. You're like, well, what? So you want to keep people there as long as possible.
So how can you start to quantify, or quantify is the wrong word. How can you start to adjust when you notice people are dropping off? Have you noticed it's more of something you say, a topic that you do, um, where where are you even starting to analyze, and how are you keeping people listening longer?
So the beautiful thing when you look at your retention stats,
Mm-hmm.
so you have let's make it easy. You have a 1 hour podcast
Okay.
and half of your audience leaves in the 30-minute mark.
Mhm.
That makes me wonder two things. Maybe my podcast is too long.
Mhm.
Maybe I should try a 30-minute episode next week and
Mhm.
then look at the stats. If I do a 30-minute episode where I normally do a 1 hour episode
Mhm.
and everybody stays, maybe I need to not do so many 1 hour podcast episodes.
Hmm.
Maybe I need to do a 30-minute episode. Maybe my audience doesn't have time to listen to an hour. They really like a 30-minute.
Okay.
Again, you can always ask.
Yep.
You can ask your audience, hey, how long should the podcast be? What do you guys think?
Yep.
Do a poll, ask a question on social media, use your SpeakPipe link,
Mm-hmm.
have people send you messages and ask the question. The other thing is maybe, and I helped a podcaster last week with this. They thought they had to do a minimum amount of time in their podcast. Like it
Mhm.
had to be a 1 hour show, but they only had 15 minutes of content.
Yep.
They didn't know what else to talk about. So then they just started talking about all kinds of stuff to fill up time.
Okay.
If you have 15 minutes of content, don't make a 1 hour podcast, make a 15-minute podcast.
Yeah.
There's no rule. It's not like you have to meet a magic number.
Yeah.
Just create the show that you have content for. I have 5-minute episodes. I have an hour and 20-minute podcast episodes. Like whatever. It's whatever the content serves.
Yeah.
So my biggest caution for everyone is if you're noticing a pattern that everybody leaves at a certain point, press play on your podcast and go to that point where everybody's leaving. What happened? What are you talking about? Did you get off topic? Did you go somewhere that distracted the audience? Something happened, right? And it could simply be that the person listening got to their job, got out of their car and hit stop on your podcast. It's nothing about you. They just arrived at their location.
Yeah.
They went into work, they came back out to the car and they never pressed play on the rest. That's fine. That's nothing to do with your content. That's due to the length of their drive or whatever they were doing. They walked the dog around the block. They got home. There's still 10 minutes left of your show, but they hit stop because now they have to go do something else, cut the lawn. There's nothing against you. That's as much time they had.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of people get really nervous and upset because they want to make people listen. It's sometimes it could just be the length of your show, could be the topic, could be whatever. Right. So just if you look at that on a regular basis and track it for a while,
Okay.
I think that's really good. And then the one thing I would say about your numbers, remember it's only a snapshot. It's really hard to say that these are true facts, true numbers, 100% guaranteed. That's a listen.
Yeah.
There's listens and there's downloads.
Yep.
On my phone right now, I have probably 45 episodes that have downloaded to my phone. The podcast host has got credit for that download as a listen on their end. I haven't pressed play yet.
Yeah.
And some of them I might delete because I've got so many. Right.
Yeah.
So congratulations. You got a stat from me as a listener of your show,
Yep.
but I never even pressed play. I don't even know what you talked about.
Yeah.
Right. So I go back to the engagement piece. That's really important because those are real numbers. That's real people. And then just kind of watch whatever you can do to raise that up. And I just tell everybody, try to make this next episode better than the last one.
Okay.
That's it. Just every single episode, a little bit better, better research, being more comfortable on the microphone, better engagement, bringing your audience in to the podcast, letting them hear their voice on your show. Those are all like engagement things. People buying you a coffee or whatever you're going to brand it as, and then mentioning them on the show. I would just like to thank listener ABC from Columbus, Ohio. You supported the show. I really appreciate you for donating. The donations that come into the show, I really don't need them, but I'm going to be taking all the donations that come into my podcast from you as a listener. They're all going to go to a family in my neighborhood who really could use some help with groceries this week. So everything you give me, I'm giving to them. So just so you know, that's where the money's going.
Mm-hmm.
Your whole audience is going to sit up, Shawn, in that moment and go, if I give money to Shawn, he's going to help a family,
Yeah.
like a single mom with 2 kids.
Yep.
I'm going to grab my credit card so fast,
Mm-hmm.
Shawn, because I already like you and I know you and I trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do something like that, that's a form of engagement. You're giving to your audience, you're giving value, you're sharing your thoughts, you're there to help your audience. And now let them give back to you through voice messages like SpeakPipe and then Buy Me a Coffee website.
Mm-hmm.
Let people donate, even if you don't need the money, because then you can take that money and do something special with it.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a form of engagement, and that will help your retention as well. And I would say to you, when you look at your stats and your retention levels, for me, I told you 60%.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get to the end of my episode and it's a 45-minute episode and I know that 60% of my audience are still here, those are the true fans of the show that are really bought in because they listen to the entirety of my podcast. So that's where I talk to them. I don't really talk to them as much in the beginning because those aren't always my true diehard listeners, right? They could be there for a minute and leave. I save all that stuff for the end because I know they're going to respond, right?
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
like a call to action at near the end of the show, maybe not the very end, but close to the end, because I know my core audience is listening at that point and they're more apt to respond.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now, I know that how you prepare for your shows, you'll go and listen to every single episode if time allows of someone's podcast, right? And so what do you think the best way? I personally struggle to prepare depending on the guest. If the guest has a podcast, really easy for me to go and listen to those. If the guest has been on podcasts, a big thing for me, I go and listen to those shows because I don't want to go and ask the same questions.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing for me. But if they're not on these different shows, a lot of the um a lot of the guests that I have are either in my network, they're referred to me, or social media. Those are the two biggest things. And I can go through someone's Instagram page, but it doesn't tell the entire tale. How can I go and prepare for someone more efficiently?
When you do an interview, are you meeting the person on the day of the interview and hitting record?
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, one thing I've been doing, it's not mandatory by any means, but I meet everybody ahead of time. You and I met, right? We had a conversation. There's been a few weeks, a few days between it, and now we're back again. So what's happened for me is I had a chance to talk to you. I asked you the questions, which I then formulated what I wanted to talk about today with you. But then I also had a chance to go listen to your show. I had a chance to go do more research. Gave me a little bit of a gap.
Yeah.
And it gave my potential guest a gap to come and check me out because maybe I'm not the right show for them.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So there's this open break in between that allows me to do that. That's a time commitment for you as the host and for the guest. But there's a value. And I've actually heard my listeners reach out to me and say, I heard you mention that you had a pre-interview. Does that mean you guys invested time in this recording? Because if you did, it shows. Like it really shows.
Yeah.
So that's the one way I work around it. And side bonus, I get to hear what they sound like. Do they have a microphone? Do they have a dog barking in the background?
Yeah.
I get all those questions answered before I even hit record.
Yeah.
It's a little side benefit. But that helps me to kind of figure out. So I always ask them, have you been on another podcast? Yes. When you go on other podcasts, what do you most likely talk about? They tell me. I'm like, okay, so I want to do something different than that. And they sit up and I'm like, you've already did that. That's great content. You already have it in your library. Let's go do something else. What have you not talked about?
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about more?
Okay.
And they're like, I've never talked about A, B, and C. Well, let's talk about that on the show because now that means something you've never talked about means you're probably going to share it without me even having to ask.
Yep.
Because you've already answered those 5 questions on the other podcasts. Well, so I'm not going to ask you those questions. To your point, I want to ask you something new that you're excited about. So I've had authors come on, for example, and they've written 5 books, but they're writing their 6th book. And it's almost ready and they're so excited. But nobody asked me about my 6th book. They're like, Yeah, it's kind of like your favorite rock star. They come on to an interview and all they want to talk about is the hits. They're like,
Yeah.
I do write other things. You know, I have new
Yeah.
songs coming out all the time and I'd love to
Yeah.
talk about them, but you want to talk about the song I wrote 20 years ago? Okay, let's do it again.
Yeah.
You can see them so bored.
Yeah.
So bored. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Right. But as soon as you ask them about something new, they sit up. They're like, I can talk about the new thing.
Hmm.
Yes, I want to talk about that. So
Okay. Gotcha. And then the other question I had was right on the tip of my tongue. It's one of those moments. That's what it was. When you're even pre-qualifying a guest, I mean, this I've only not released an episode twice now, but both of those episodes, it just or three times rather. I went through, they ended up being about a half hour and I just stopped it. I was like, yep, that's about enough. Like, not in a rude way, just me and my guest, we it just wasn't the right vibe energy. Didn't enjoy the conversation itself, and I didn't think that it would be a good episode. Um, but then people have reached back out to me, and I'm just honest with them. But how do you get over that like little hump of not feeling bad about really not releasing an episode if that's ever been something that you've come across?
I've actually heard people say that you can lie to them and tell them that something happened to the podcast. And, like
Mm-hmm.
there was an error or it didn't
Mm-hmm.
download or something. I'm not a big fan of lying to people.
Yeah.
That's a path that's really hard to remember who you've lied to and who you
Yeah.
haven't. So I don't advise that for
Mm-hmm.
anybody. Again, my pre-interview has saved my butt so many times
Mm-hmm.
because in the pre-interview, I can tell you this person doesn't care about my audience. They just
Mm-hmm.
want to sell the program.
Yeah.
They're like, the first thing they say to me is, I want to give you an affiliate link to my $25,000 course. And here's the thing, and they're selling me.
Yeah.
And I want them to come on and talk about their book, not their course,
Yeah.
because the course doesn't get, I don't have $25,000 people that are going to buy a program. They want to
Yeah.
buy a $19 book.
Yep.
So I'm like, listen, thank you for the offer to be an affiliate. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
My audience is different. My audience is this, and I don't think this is going to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to value your time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this is going to be a good episode for you. I do know some other people who would love to have you on their show
Mm-hmm.
who do, and you do this kind of thing, but I don't think it's going to be a good fit for my audience. And
Okay.
the response is, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to waste my time either as a
Mm-hmm.
guest coming on and not getting the results that I want to see.
Mm-hmm.
So that little thing really helps to
Okay.
have that little gap. So
Okay.
try it with somebody. If you're not
Yeah.
sure about somebody, if you really know them,
Yeah.
you don't have to do this. But
Yeah.
if you're unsure, it's a stranger you've never met,
Mm-hmm.
put them through a pre-interview.
Okay.
Just send them 15 minutes, chat with them, get a good sense of them. Are you kind of working together, vibing together? And then just, you can either go into the recording, you can have them back tomorrow and record. It gives you that little safety net.
Okay.
Just
All
blame
right.
it on the process,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This is how I do it.
That's
Like, what are they going to do? Right.
yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, even it's the same thing with me. Like, I'll think of my regular business as opposed to the podcast where I go and meet with different gyms, I meet with different nutrition stores. And again, it's if it's I do I do the same thing where it's I go and have a 15-20 minute conversation where it's not I'm pitching them. I'm going and just seeing if it's even the right fit to have them qualified to go and work with me. Because I had a time where I had met with a nutrition store. They sell Herbalife shakes and all of these different products. And my entire brand is built about around healthy relationships with food. Look, if someone listening to this and you get results using Herbalife, great. It's just not my thing, right? And so they had wanted to go and meet. It was an hour away. And I was like, let's just hop on the phone first. Within 5 minutes, I knew, hey, this isn't going to be the right fit. And it saved me an hour drive. So I'm already doing that just now with the podcast, you know? So that's super helpful and easy. I'm like, oh, I already do that. Now let me just go and actually do it for the podcast. So
Yeah. It's
yeah.
a great, again, if you know the person, you can skip all those steps.
Yeah.
Great. you already have a relationship with it. You know you're going to vibe with them. You're going to have a great conversation. You know
Hmm.
they could bring value to your audience.
Hmm.
But when you meet with somebody that you don't know through
Yep.
one of the Facebook groups or whatever,
Yeah.
you just don't know who they are.
Hmm.
You're taking a chance. You have to be the security for your audience.
Hmm.
You don't want to put anybody in front of your audience that you would not endorse,
Hmm.
right? Whatever the product is, the service, the
Yep.
advice. Somebody comes on your show and gives the total opposite of what you've been telling your audience, and they
Yeah.
show up and you're sitting there going, this is this is the opposite of everything I've done in the last 40 episodes. And
Yeah.
here's this person telling my audience to do the opposite. I
Hmm.
look silly,
Yeah.
right? So
See, but
that's not going to
then
happen.
like the caveat for me is you go and listen to Rogan, and I'll bring up Rogan a lot because I mean I love Joe Rogan
Yeah,
personally, right? Do I agree with every single thing? No, but you got to be able to um build your own set of beliefs here. And so he has left wing, right wing, and all of these red, blue, whatever you want to
yeah,
call it, right? All of these different personalities, and he's able to go and talk to every single person versus a lot of us that do podcasts where I'm at in a very beginner intermediate stage, right? 3 years in is a baby. And so that's where the conversation for me comes in of, okay, how can I have people and I look at something like that. How can I go and have the guests that I don't naturally agree with and have an open conversation with? But at the same time, I want to keep like my brand and what
right.
my own
Yeah,
beliefs and what I believe it. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't
I
know your
like I
thoughts
like
there.
this thing called a dialogue, where you have
Hmm.
two people who don't agree, who can talk to each other like human beings,
Hmm.
and at the end of the day, walk away from the episode going, "Well, it's great, Shawn. I think we should all eat junk food every day and drink Coca-Cola and eat
Hmm.
eat horribly,
Hmm.
and you want me to live healthy. We can agree to disagree, have a great
Hmm.
conversation, but here's my side." I like that because it gives your
Yeah.
audience a chance to go, "Wow, there's two different opinions here, and these guys aren't fighting. This is
Mm.
great. We need more of
Yeah.
that."
Yeah.
I'm just thinking more about if somebody came on your show and said something harmful to your
Mm.
audience that
Okay.
hurt your audience, you need to
That's
step in and go, okay, well, I'm not, maybe not going to release that episode because I know
yeah.
that my audience would be confused. It would cause damage to everything we built in the last bit with them. That's all.
That's
Just keep your audience in mind in everything that you do.
okay. I understand that a lot more.
Yeah.
Okay. Sweet.
Yeah. So what are your big plans for the show? What do you want to do? What makes you happy about the podcast? Where are you headed?
Um, right now, especially after this conversation, I mean, the biggest thing is finding more of just a balance of how can I provide the most to people, but also network with the most amount of people? How can I be able to bring my audience into the show more? Because it hasn't been a focus. I love giving valuable information, but in terms of getting feedback, I haven't been doing that. And so that's the biggest thing that I'd like to start to work on in terms of yeah, that's the biggest thing is actually bringing the audience and hearing more people's thoughts, opinions, and then being able to share those and share my own thoughts and processes on those. Like all of my clients that have questions every single week, they always have a lot of synchronicities. And so a lot of the times that's what gives me content for a Facebook post or an Instagram video, things like that. This is what all of my clients are dealing with this week. This is 60 seconds of how I'm helping them through it. But now I can go and have that same 60-second little blip or blurb and now, okay, can I just create a 5 to 15 minute segment on, wow, this is what my clients were struggling with this week. This is how we're gonna shift that focus.
Mhm.
So being able to bring the audience in a little bit more, not just have like all of my client questions in there. Um, but yeah, I think that's the main focus right now.
Yeah. Little
Yeah.
tricks too. Like occasionally I'll hide a secret word at the end of my podcast.
Okay.
So for this, it might be coffee.
Hmm.
So there, I just gave a secret word to everybody. coffee. So if you listen this far, my 60% now are here with us
Mm-hmm.
near the end of the show.
Mm-hmm.
I say coffee. So respond to me with the word coffee in an email, go to my speak pipe, whatever, but respond back to me and just type in the word coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Let me know. And what's going to happen is when this goes out, I'm going to start getting these messages from people I know that listen, and new people I've never met.
Mm-hmm.
All it's going to say in the email is coffee.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. I know I have a listen. I know that I
Okay.
have now I have a contact information. I have an
Okay.
email. I can
Mm-hmm.
reach out to that person who's listened to this point and
Mm-hmm.
said the word coffee,
Mm-hmm.
right? Back to
Mm-hmm.
me. So now I've got engagement. So now that's easy to measure. Am I getting
Mm-hmm.
more of that engagement every time I leave a secret word at the end of my show?
Mm-hmm.
It's going up,
Okay.
then that's a good thing, right?
Okay.
So that's one way.
Okay.
Um, just put little things like that, or put your questions for them to answer. I do on my show, I do a question of the month.
Mm-hmm.
So the question of the month for this month that we're recording in right now is when you look at your phone, like right
Mm-hmm.
now as you're listening, are you reading the words that are in the episode show notes on your phone? Do you
Mm-hmm.
read them or no? That's all. That's
Mm-hmm.
all I want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Let me know. Go to my speak pipe, go to my website, leave me a message. The question of the month, do you read the show episode notes on your phone? For me, my phone is usually in my pocket. I don't
Yeah.
even know the next episode title. I
Yeah.
just love your show, so it just goes from episode to episode, plays right through. I really don't look at my phone because I'm doing something else with my
Gotcha.
hands. I
Yeah.
don't have time to pull out my phone, look at the title, hit play, pull it out again, put play.
Yeah.
My phone's in my pocket. I just
Yeah.
listen to you because I like your show.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I want to know is if are we spending too much time on the notes part and maybe not enough
Mm-hmm.
time on the engagement part? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I just
Okay.
wanted to know what my listeners do. So asking a question and a secret word,
Okay.
two ways to get your audience to start giving you feedback.
Okay. So with that, something that stuck out to me that sparked a question for me was getting someone to, and when I say getting, just interacting with someone. Getting was the wrong phrase to use. But when someone starts to reach out to me and interacts with me, having that emailing back and forth, personally, I feel uncomfortable to go and take that email and put it right into a subscriber list or a newsletter,
Yeah,
right?
I wouldn't do that.
I like I've never done that, but so for me, podcasts that I've almost been a part of, or like when someone has screened me for a podcast, I will go and add name, phone number, um, email sometimes. And when someone automatically adds me to their email list, I unsubscribe and I don't do the podcast. Like I don't it's just morally in a sense, I guess
Yeah,
for me, not
it's a
even
funnel.
morally, but
It's a
like,
funnel.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I just feel weird doing it because then if someone was to listen to that show and go and interact with them, the same thing may happen. And I'm a part of that show. So now you may start to discredit me.
yeah,
I don't know your thoughts on that. I think you're in the same boat as me as myself, but just
yeah,
curious.
yeah. You're not going to see emails where I'm going to sell you something,
Yeah.
Shawn. Like, no,
Yeah.
I don't. That's not why I'm doing this, right?
Yeah.
It's all about helping people,
Yeah.
and that's what you do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Please don't do that because we're supposed to opt into a newsletter
Mm-hmm.
and you're supposed to be able to opt out of
Mm-hmm.
a newsletter. So if you
Yeah.
just assume that people sent you an email, so you're allowed to email them and spam them now, that's not a good practice.
Yeah. Okay. I figured you were in the same boat, and especially just like in terms of the first way I interpreted it from my perspective of when you had first said it, you were like, "Oh, now you have their contact info." When I hear contact info,
Right. Good. I
that's
like you
yeah,
clarified that. That's good.
yeah.
But now you can
So
actually email them back.
yeah,
They opened the door. They responded with the word of the day or the question answer to the question. Great. Now you can send them back a message and say, thanks for listening to the show. If you ever have any feedback for me, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but really appreciate you responding with the word of the episode. Thanks. That's so cool of you. Thanks
yeah,
for listening. Like,
yeah,
that's so nice,
yeah.
right?
That's
That's
true.
fine.
Yeah. And then how much does the quality of the video, as you can see, you look at your camera, you look at my camera, when this is condensed, especially, my camera looks like I'm sitting in a toaster. Okay. Like my this
Yeah.
this computer is my second computer, I'm gonna have it until it dies. Computers are like cars to me. I'm
Same
gonna
with me.
keep rolling with it, right? And right now, I don't have an external camera. I don't have the funds to go and buy an external camera. Not a sob story, just it's not, especially when the podcast isn't something that it's just because I enjoy doing it. It's not something where I'm itching to have the best quality and all of the gizmos and gadgets and things, right? $20 microphone. Um, so am I even just overthinking the camera quality here?
I think there's a problem in podcasting where podcasters are being forced to do video, some against their will because it's popular.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually just did an episode of the How to Podcast series, and it's called The Truth About Video Podcasts on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love for you to listen to that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not trying to get a listen
No, I
by it,
understand. Yeah,
but
yeah.
what is said in there, I think you'll understand my point of view on all of this,
Okay.
because I've worked with people who want to remain anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be seen on video. They can't be
Mm-hmm.
seen on video. The topic they talk about, their story, they could put themselves in harm's way
Yeah.
if they were shown on video.
Mm-hmm.
So they use pen names, fake names, avatars. They can't do video.
Mm-hmm.
I have also worked with people who do true crime podcast. It's 2 hours, and the idea that you have to now do a true crime audio podcast and then create a movie to go with a true crime podcast,
Yeah.
because it has to be video.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do a video podcast because you have an audio podcast. This have to that's associated with podcasting, I challenge that. I really challenge it, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is your voice
Mm-hmm.
and your podcast.
Yeah.
You're going to have the widest reach in audio format as of the time of recording, the widest reach for your show through audio, with the less barriers that you have to climb over to get to your goal. Video's great if you already have all of the tools and that's what you do. You're really good at video, then do that because you're good at it. For me, I do occasional video stuff, but primarily most of the things I do is audio.
Okay. That makes sense. I didn't think it was a big deal. It's not like I'm making it a big deal.
Yeah.
But it's at least something helpful to ask.
Yeah.
Right. And
Right.
that way I'm not getting in my own way about it.
Yeah.
You
Because
know?
when somebody hears that they have to do, they say, I want to start a podcast, Shawn. And they're like, great.
Mhm.
The story you're going to hear in my episode briefly is
Mhm.
somebody walks into a gym and
Mhm.
goes, I want to get healthy. So I'm going to ride the bike for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And while the person's on the bike, all of these people from the gym come around the person on the bike and go, well, if you really want to be healthy, you got to do squats.
Mhm.
Let's go over here. Couple 100 pounds. Let's go. You got to start with that. And on the way to the squats, you just left the bike. Someone stops you and goes, you should be running like all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And then somebody stops you and go, you need more sleep. Why are you up?
Yeah.
No. You need to eat better. And this
Yeah.
person's like, I just want to ride the bike. Can I just ride the bike? Like, I just want to ride the bike.
Okay.
And there's like all these people telling you, no. If you want to be a good, healthy person, you got to do all these 100 other things. Those are mandatory to be a good bike rider.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I just want to start a podcast, Shawn. I just want to record and put it in the world. No. You got to blog. You got to be on all your social medias. You got to be on all of them. You got to post like 5 times a day. You got to have a LinkedIn. You got to have a website. You got to do a video podcast. You got to do transcriptions. And they're just like, can I just ride the bike?
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And I
That's
just
right.
want people to, because I know people leave because they're like, if it's 40 hours of work to do a 1-hour podcast, guess what? You just helped me come to an answer. I already have a job.
Yep.
I'm not going to work 80 hours a week, my regular job, and 40 hours of podcasting. I'm just going to quit. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the
fair.
problem is there's more people leaving because of all this. You have to do these things.
Yep.
There's good things to do, but it's
Mhm.
not have to do
Okay.
in podcasting. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
Nice. That analogy is helpful for me. So yeah, thank you. Like that's an easy one for me, anything health and fitness related. Because I'm picturing, I'm visualing myself walking into a gym, sitting on a bike, walking to the squat rack, and then a person comes up and points me towards the treadmill. A person
Yeah.
points me to the bed that they have there for some reason. Like, yeah. So
Right.
it was an easy visual for
There
me.
you go.
Yeah.
So there you go.
All right.
So
Awesome.
that's it. So the overwhelm, we all need to ratchet it down a little bit,
Okay.
because if you want to do video, do video. If you want to do audio, and don't feel like you're not good enough if you don't do all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Do the thing that you're good at and do
Yeah.
it well. And don't let anybody push you into a corner and say you're not doing it right.
Gotcha.
Podcasting is for everyone.
Yep.
If you want to use your phone, use your phone. You want to do video, do video. You want to be audio only, do audio only. You want to be on YouTube? Great, be on YouTube. Do whatever serves you, but don't feel like you're not doing it right.
Gotcha.
Do it your way.
Yeah.
There's room for everybody in podcasting.
That's easy. That's helpful. Because I hate doing video personally. I'd rather do the audio and I can pump them out. But putting something onto YouTube, making it so that I'm using AI to go and create a bunch of clips and everything that get no traction anyways, because I don't even enjoy putting them out. It feels, I hate doing it. And I don't want to anymore.
A little trick to get you to listen to that episode called The Truth About Video Podcast.
Yep.
Listen to the stat about how many people are doing a non-video YouTube episode.
Mhm.
So just a picture, no moving pictures, no nothing, just a picture with the audio attached. Go there and listen to the stat of how many people are doing it. We're not the minority. My podcasts on YouTube are all audio only with a single photo attached to it. It doesn't move. There's no video. It's just a picture and the audio is attached. When you go into podcasting rooms, they're going to tell you that's the worst thing you can do on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually one of the best things you can do on YouTube because it feeds the YouTube Music app, which is a standalone app outside of YouTube for your phone. Okay. And it's audio only on YouTube Music.
Didn't even know they had it.
It's not video.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a very high percentage of people who are doing very well with audio only, imaged, no video episodes on YouTube. The percentage will shock you.
Okay.
So there's a little trick to get people to go listen to that episode.
I'm going to listen to it regardless. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's what I would say to you is just, there's going to be a lot of people and a lot of opinions in the world. Mm-hmm. You need to go through and filter what works for you. Like you've said many times here today, filter what works for you and be happy with what you've chosen. And don't let anybody tell you you made the wrong choice. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Because you won't know regardless.
And just test it. If it doesn't work, then go try something else. If getting on the bike doesn't help you lose weight, then maybe you do need to do some squats.
Yeah.
Maybe they're right.
Yep.
But don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
You've been there 5 minutes in the gym. No. You need a plan, right?
Yeah.
So get a plan, execute the plan, measure your results, watch your fat intake and all that, your calorie intake and your all that stuff. You got to measure it, right? As you measure it, then you can watch it grow. To your name of your podcast, wrap it all up.
Yep, that's it.
Then it'll grow.
Mic drop for you.
See?
Yeah.
I love
that's really growth by Shawn right there. So thanks, Dave. Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful.
I would love to have you come back in the future and give us an update on things you're trying. Maybe things worked, things didn't work.
Yep.
Come back and give us an update. Let us know what's going on with your show.
Yeah.
And again, let's shout out your podcast, Shawn, before we go. Yeah. Tell us what your latest episode or the best episode to start at for a new listener. Where should they go?
Yeah.
How do we find your show?
So it's Growth by Shawn, and that's on all the podcast listening platforms. So the show that will be coming out tomorrow is built around how to build a personal brand. Where people should start is actually closer to episode 6 or 7. 10 fitness myths debunked. Okay. I don't know if that's specifically what it's called, but it's debunking fitness myths, and it's actually with an old college professor of mine.
Nice.
And I think that is one of the most useful and beneficial episodes to date. So that's where I'd start.
Okay. That's great. And we'll have a link to your Buy Me a Coffee. We'll have a link to your SpeakPipe. And if you're listening again, a reminder, let us know the secret word of the day for our episode here was coffee. Love to hear from you with that. And I would suggest to you to go to the Buy Me a Coffee link that's in the show notes. And instead of giving me a coffee, which I appreciate, much rather you give it to Shawn and let him have the joy of seeing that email come through and say, somebody bought you a coffee. So please don't give it to me, give it to Shawn. And I will have a link to his Buy Me a Coffee in the show notes as well.
Dave, thank you for everything. Much appreciated.
Awesome. Come back sometime soon, okay?
I very much will.
Okay, thanks.
Beautiful.
Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. I hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope you're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast, to keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our Meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us, and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca, and you can come and join in on our Meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.